Thank you. That was amazing. Just take a deep breath. In and out. Feels good. We're here. We made it. My name is Christine Megason, and it is my pleasure and honor to be here tonight. I am so excited. I'm so excited to talk about what we're going to talk about because I feel like I have this conversation on a regular basis with my girlfriends. This is something that we talk about a lot. We're going to be talking about this whole world of kid activities, right? So kids activities, there's all these wonderful options that are out there for your kids. So whether your kids are itty bitty tiny, because I know there's like water babies and stuff like that now. They've got this whole thing. You just throw your baby in the pool and they start swimming. Right? I kind of feel like that's me as a mom. I'm a baby mom. They've just thrown me in the pool and I better start swimming. And that's where I've been. So they've got water babies all the way up until maybe you feel like, you know what, my kids are kind of out of that. Like my kids are on their own or whatever. But I know that what we're going to talk about tonight is going to apply to your life, no matter where you are on that spectrum. Because we're going to be talking about how do we walk through this world, in this case, kid activities, in a way that honors God, where we're not driven by the things and the messages and the pressures and the competition of the world. And instead, we just walk in our calling as moms, our calling as families, and the calling that you kids have. That's where we're going, okay? Does that sound good? Okay, so when I was a kid growing up, there weren't that many activities. There just weren't that many. Like I started thinking about it the other day, and I'm thinking, why does it feel so overwhelming right now? But I think part of it is because there just weren't that many when we were growing up. I thought about it, and I thought, okay, there was piano lessons. So maybe your mom, signed you up for those. And so you took piano lessons with the lady in town who taught lessons, right? So there was the piano lesson lady. You're laughing because you know exactly who she is. You're thinking her in your mind right now, piano lesson lady. And so you signed up, your mom signed you up, you had piano lessons. Okay, so there was piano lessons. There was scouts, boys or girls, right? Okay, most of us were in Girl Scouts, maybe, brownies or that sort of thing. So there were scouts. Maybe dance, because in my town they had dance, but I wouldn't say that was not an option for boys. I'm sure it was, just none of them took it up on the option, right? So it was girls, kind of a few did dance. And then there was sports, and by sports I mean there was one sport, and it was Little League for boys and softball for girls. And so for the majority of my childhood, that was it. You did piano lessons, or you did scouts, maybe you did dance, or you did one sport. And that sport lasted like 6 weeks in the spring. And then that was it. And so, okay, I know in your mind you want to go there. We're not going to spend the evening reminiscing about the 80s, although leg warmers. I mean, let's just say that, because we could just spend the night talking about those. And it would be great, but we're not going to go there, because I don't want to say, man, things were easier then, and it was less complicated. And now, it's just the evil of just all these options, and that's what overwhelms us. Because in a way, I want to challenge us to think about all the options we have as moms for our kids as really an awesome blessing that we get a parent in this season of life right now when there's so many. Here's why. Because back in the day, if you were a kid that you were not necessarily musically gifted, not going to play piano, maybe you weren't, for whatever reason, interested in scouts, you couldn't dance, and you couldn't swing a bat and hit a ball, well, then you were stuck with nothing. And so we live in an age, and we mother at an age right now, where there are so many options out there, and I hope that we can begin to see that as maybe that's actually a good thing, if we can navigate it in a good way. Because now, no matter what your kid is interested in, all of the crazy possible things that they could have an inkling towards and a quirkiness towards, there is probably a teacher or a coach, somebody out there who is willing to put together a class or a team or an event that you can sign your kids up for, and they can be in all of their glory. That's the good thing, right, about lots of options and about parenting right now. If we cannot get overwhelmed, because the flip side is that then we get overwhelmed with so many options and feeling like we don't know what's right for our kids. What should they be doing? Should they be doing this, or should they be doing that? Are we putting all of our time and money in the right things? And that's where we get all kind of swirly and stirred up as moms. So I call it the swirl. It's an unofficial name. I don't know that anyone's officially titled it besides my friend Stacy and I. But we call it the swirl. And what the swirl is these conversations that sometimes happen around with parents and particularly moms. And I love talking to moms. Like, for me to go and have coffee or a walk with a friend, like that just fills up my heart and soul, and I walk away like, I can just continue on because I'm filled up and I'm encouraged. So I love sitting down and talking with moms, but what happens sometimes in those conversations, and maybe you know what I'm talking about, is there's this thing called the swirl. And what that is that innocently, we just begin talking about what we've been doing lately and what our kids have been doing lately. And suddenly, I'm sitting there as a mom, and I'm listening to my friend, and she's talking about these activities that her kids are doing. And I begin to realize, I didn't even know that activity existed, and I did not sign my kid up for that and probably should have. Should I have? Maybe I should have. Are we behind? We should have started 3 years ago. What are we going to do now? Right? The swirl. The doubts start coming, the fears, and suddenly you begin to think, I have a kindergartner, and they are not currently signed up for the kindergarten travel team of horseshoe pitching. They're probably going to work at Whataburger for the rest of their lives. Like, you go all the way down the path in this, because we realize that activities are good for our kids because they learn and they grow and they get stretched, and, they are great. But we begin to think that, like, they're the end-all, be-all for our children's success someday, right? So the swirl comes, the doubts, and the second-guessing as the mom, and it's all really rooted in fear and comparison and competition and worry about our kids, because we want the best for them. So tonight, that's what we want to talk about. How do we go from getting caught up in the swirl to being able to just walk confidently through this whole world? Because it's a thing. The whole thing of kid activities. So, okay, that's where we're going. I want to know first, though, if I'm alone in this struggle, because I like to feel better about myself. And so what I'd love for you to do is talk about, do you know what I'm talking about when I talk about the swirl? Those messages that come at you, that the world is telling you about what your kids should be doing, what your family should be doing, the questions that get raised up in your mind. So, what I'm going to have you do, sometimes at Momentum, we have a talk, and then we do discussion. But tonight, I'm going to do it a little different. We're going to talk a little, then we're going to discuss, and we're going to talk, and we're going to discuss, and we're kind of going to bounce back and forth. So I'd love it if you would cluster up the people just sitting next to you in your row, the row behind you, 2s or 3s. I think if you get more than that, you're going to run out of time, because we're not going to spend a lot of time, and I want everyone to have a chance to share. And if you see somebody that's sitting on their own, my hope would be that you would just reach out to them or invite them in or go move towards her, and so that no one's left on their own. But just circle up, 2s and 3s, and I would love if you would answer this question for me. What messages does the world tell you about kid activities? What does the world tell you? What's the messages that you're hearing on a regular basis for you and your family as it comes to kid activities? Okay, discuss. hope you had a chance to turn and talk to your neighbor, maybe get to know them and hear a little bit about maybe what are some of those messages that the world is telling us when it comes to this whole issue, this whole thing with kid activity. So I think if I kind of polled the room, my guess is that some of those messages would boil down into what I think are kind of three things that the world is telling us. So here's one. One is that you need to do everything, right? We feel the pressure that our kids need to be involved in everything. And I think part of it comes from when we were growing up, we did everything. But remember, there was only 4 things that we could do, and one of them only lasted like a month. So we feel like maybe our kids need to do everything because we're in this zone of like, we did everything. And maybe even as you grew up and you got into junior high and high school and there were more options for you besides the 4, you maybe grew up like I did in a smaller town where, they needed everyone to be out for everything, like to field an entire team for sports, and then also to have an entire school play. Like you all had to be in everything. And the teachers and the coaches, they just worked together to make sure that the schedules didn't overlap so that you had the opportunity to do it. And the seasons were really short, and you maybe had a practice or 2, right? And now we have multiple practices a week, and the seasons don't just last a month, they last months. And in some cases, kids are doing activities all year round. You know this, right? You're driving them to all these places. So we're doing a lot. And so but we're feeling this, sense of we need to do everything, because as a mom, I think, well, how am I supposed to know what they're going to be good at? I mean, we just need to try, just dabble, and we need to try all of these different things because they may turn out at the end of the day to just be brilliant in something. And, I want to give them that chance to figure it out. So we try it all. And so it reminds me as if you were going to a restaurant. I'm going to use the Cheesecake Factory because their menu is 15 pages long. Your server comes and they're like, what would you like? And I'm like, I am in the soup still. Like, something on page 7 might be the thing for me, but I don't know yet because I'm on page 2. So the Cheesecake Factory, 15-page menu, all kinds of options. What are you in the mood for? Well, I don't know. I mean, there may be something on page 9 that is exactly the perfect fit for me, but I don't know that yet. Maybe I haven't tasted it yet. I haven't tried it. But I don't think if I read the Cheesecake Factory, I would draw the conclusion of like, I'm just going to order it all. I would like one of everything. Just bring it out, right? Because one, that would cost a lot of money. And it would take a lot of time for them to prepare it and for me to eat it. And at the end, I would feel pretty sick. But I think in a way that's kind of what we do with activities is with our kids. We think, well, how are we going to know what they might like somewhere down the road? And so we'll just try it all. And then it costs a lot of money. And we spend a lot of time. And in some cases, as a family, we feel kind of sick, don't we? So what do we do with that, though? Because we want to know what they're good at. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Second message. You need to start early or your kid is going to fall behind. This is the one that I probably wrestle with the most as a mom. Just this last spring, my son, who's in 5th grade now, was finishing up 4th grade. And we had to sign up at that point for whether he was going to participate in the tackle football league in our community or not. Well, he'd not participated in tackle football for 3rd grade when it was offered, or for 4th grade when it was offered. And it was great. He did flag football, and he enjoyed that and had a great time. But in our community, flag football at the time was not an option for 5th graders. So we were having the discussion, my husband and I, and we brought in our son, and we're kind of talking through, how do you want to handle this? Because it's either tackle football or no football, right? And if we take 2 years off of football and other people keep playing, and then what's going to happen if they want to play in junior high? And then if they play how are you going to be the NFL first-round draft pick? I didn't say all those words, but I thought them, right? So that's where we go because we think we need to start immediately. We need to, and no messing around here. We're not just going to, do it in the rec league. We're going to put a travel team together. It's going to be preschool travel team. We're going to travel around. It's going to be every weekend. But we laugh because there's part of us that resembles it. I'm like, guilty. We have kids on travel teams in some situations and not in others. Or we laugh because we're just thinking, who are these crazy people who put their kids on travel teams at all, right? I mean, it's become a whole thing. But part of it is we make our decisions out of fear. We fear for our kids that they'll fall behind. And I'm not sure what we think they're falling behind exactly. I think probably their peers, the opinions of their coaches, that sort of thing. But it's rooted in fear. The last one is, you need to live your life through your kids. And this one's kind of tricky because most of us would be like, oh no, I'm so not that person, that dad, the dad who does that, right? And so we're like, no, I'm not that parent. We're not going to live our lives vicariously through our kids and let our kids be the championship. But we see them. We know what they're like. We know what they're like, right? So everything's the best camps. They're coaching them from the stands beforehand, afterwards, the whole thing. And so we think, we need to live our life through our kids. But what I found with this one is you don't realize that this is you until it is you. So my daughter, let's just say she is not a fan of hand-eye coordination. She's not a fan of it. I think she would like to be a fan of it, but she's chosen not to. And so for her, if it involves your hands and balls, we're going to struggle a little bit. It's just not her thing. But when I was growing up, I was a tomboy. I lived in a neighborhood. There were 6 of us in our grade, 5 boys and myself. So what do? Well, you play football, or you play baseball, or basketball, whatever you do. So I was a tomboy growing up, which served me really well when it came then time for me to do sports. I remember my mom had huge high hopes for me that I was going to be a very artsy girl. I was going to be into theater. I was going to be into dance, music, the whole thing. And she remembers my very first t-ball game, because remember, only the sport available. And I got up and I hit the ball right off of the plate, and it went flying into the outfield, and I did the whole home run thing or whatever. And she turned to my dad and she was like, well, there goes that. She was just like, she's going to be an athlete. And that was my life. So for me as a mom, I'm thinking we're going to relate, my daughter and I will relate it through sports. So I coached her. I coached her softball team. I coached her basketball team. And we just did this whole thing until I started to see a whole lack of joy in my daughter's eyes. Not interested. Having a great time with her friends. And that's what it should be about too, so that's great. But I began to see that maybe this isn't her thing. And then when I saw her once get up on stage to perform, and she came alive, and her eyes were just shining, and she was doing her thing, and I was like, that's her thing. And I would love to tell you that in that moment, I just wrapped myself right around this whole new plan that we were going to have for her life. Except for I didn't. I wish I could say that. I wish I would say that I wasn't that person. But it took me a minute. It took me a minute to be like, okay, this is not going to be something that she and I do. I'm going to cheer for her friends, and that's going to be what it is. It's going to be great. But it's not going to be something she and I share together. There's a part of it that you just let go of. Part of embracing our kids is letting go maybe of what we had in mind initially. I think this one also can be really subtle. I noticed it. I read an article about this, and I was like, oh man, I am this person. It's something that we do with our language where we use phrases like we and us and our. So if somebody's coming to you and they're like, hey, how's the basketball tournament going? I'm like, oh, we lost the first game, but we won the second one. I'm just going to say our defense was a little bit shaky. I think we were asleep or something. But don't worry, because we're going to play tomorrow like at 2 o'clock. I'm sorry, am I playing? I don't think so, right? But we use language like that. We, our, instead of saying, well, they won and then the first game and lost the second, and their defense seemed a little bit shaky. I think they were tired, and they're going to play tomorrow. That's a normal person, the way they talk about things, right? But I'm like, we, It's us. But I understand it. You know why? We get invested, and the reason we get invested is, dang it, because we spend a lot of time and a lot of money on these activities, so I am in on this team now. I am practically part of it. No, so we get caught up. It's one of those subtle things that I was reading this article, and I was like, oh, wow, I know I do that all the time. And what we don't realize is that some of our kids begin to take on some of that pressure because, yeah, mom and dad have spent so much time. We spend all our time going to your activities, and whew, now I feel like I need to perform. So what do we do with these messages? You need to do everything. You better start early. Your kid's going to fall behind. You need to live your life through your kids. We go back to our verse, the one that Heather mentioned earlier. This is what our focus is for Momentum this year. So if you want, I'd love it if you join me. Let's read this out loud. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. Yeah, so don't copy the behavior and customs of this world. So you might be like, okay, does that mean, what does that mean, Christine? Are you just telling me I'm supposed to yank my kids out of all their activities? Like, they're just out, and then what are we supposed to do then? Is that how it works? No. What we're supposed to do is let God transform us into a new person by what? Changing the way we think. Okay? So this is what we're going to talk about. How do we navigate this whole thing? It looks like changing the way we think. It looks like, I think, if we're going to summarize it down, when it comes to kid activities, are we being driven or are we being led? Are we being driven or are we being led? Because driven comes from the outside, right? It's those messages, it's fear, it's competition, it's pressure. It's all of that coming at us, forcing us, and we're making decisions based on all of this external stuff that's coming at us. And we're feeling driven to do it for whatever reason. We're going to be driven versus being led, and we're going to talk about this in a minute. Versus led is, Holy Spirit, how have you created our family? What are the values we have as a family? How have you created my kid? How are they wired? What would be good activities for them? We're going to talk about that in a minute. So driven or led. So here's my next question for you guys to talk about. For being driven, what is driving your decision around kid activities? So being honest in your group to be like, you know what? It really is fear when it comes to my kids. Or control, or maybe it's competition, maybe it's expectations. It's like everyone in our neighborhood plays this activity, and I really like all those parents. And so I want my kid to be on that team so we can hang out with these parents. Who knows? Here are just some options. Maybe you'll have something that's totally not on the list, but you know this is what drives you. So share with your kind of neighbors around you what's driving your decisions when it comes to kid activities. want to wrap up your conversation with that, about what's driving you in your decisions. Here's the thing that I've learned about when you have made decisions by being driven. The results of that look like burned out schedules, families, splitting and going multiple different directions, and you're calling in the grandparents. Man, I know that one. Like, we have 3 kids, 2 parents. Like, we need to be like, tag you in so that we can manage this, right? It can look like tired kids. It can look like entitled kids. I think right now we are experiencing just this kind of a kid-centric world. I don't know if you noticed that or not, and I'm so guilty of this because I looked the other day at my calendar, and I have like my family commitments on my calendar. That's like 90% of my calendar is whatever time I have to pick up my kids and take them somewhere and pick them up and then take them someplace else. And so, of course, they're like, your world revolves around me, doesn't it? Yeah, and then I said, and not on Monday night. I'm going to have something else going on, right? So, but that we kind of experience some of that. I think it also leads to, like we talked about, kids feeling some of that pressure or that expectation of, man, my parents, they spend a lot of time and a lot of money for me to do this activity, and so I better do it well. And it breeds kind of some of that performance. I read another article once, and this really challenged my thinking as a mom, but it talked about one of the best things that you can do for your kid is miss their activities sometimes. Like, just don't go. Have something else going on. Don't we do that with our friends, though? We're like, we're going to have to work that coffee date around, like, this kid's thing or whatever. But what if we just were like, I'm going to go to coffee with my friend. I know, but I have a soccer game. We'll probably have about 85,000 other ones that I can go to, It's so good, I think, for kids to see moms who have a life that's outside of them, and it takes some of the pressure off of them to realize, like, our whole world doesn't revolve around this moment in time. Like, it's okay. Give yourself permission to miss a game every once in a while and realize that it's maybe okay for kids. General lack of joy. You see that sometimes on kids' faces where they're just moving through the activities, but they've lost kind of their joy. I used to do college ministry and work with 20-somethings, and there's this whole new thing called quarter-life crisis. Maybe you've heard of that now, where 25-year-olds are like having a midlife crisis, but it's quarter life. Because they've been programmed their whole lives, and it was so that they could get into the right college, and so then they could get into the right job, and then they get the right job, and then they just want to quit because they have been going 90 miles an hour since they were 5 years old. And they just want to take a break, right? Okay, so back to our verse. I'm actually going to go back. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but what's our solution? Let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. So let's talk about that. What does it look like to change the way we think when it comes to kid activities? To not be driven, to not feel pressured to make our decisions based on the outside things coming at us, but to be led. Have an internal thing that's leading us. Have the Holy Spirit show us how we move forward, how we make decisions when it comes to all of this. So what if we made decisions about our kids and their activities, not by being driven, but being led? So how do we do that? How do we become led? I'm going to go back for a second. Okay, so how do we be led? Okay, so led looks like asking good questions. It's asking God, tell me about my family. Tell me about my kids. What's important to you, God, for us? Maybe that's a new way of thinking about things because you're like, I just sign them up when the sheet comes home, right? Their friends doing it, and they want to do it, and so we just do it. And then you get into the season, and you're pulling your hair out, and you're like, if I have to go one more of these practices, and then you're wondering, like, why you're just all ramped up. And you begin to wonder, like, wait a minute, that mom's talking and I'm getting pulled into the swirl, and I think, did I think about when we signed them up for this activity? Because maybe we should have been doing what they're doing, right? That comes. But when we're led, we're letting God show me the way for my kid. How have you made him? How have you made her? What do you want for our family? Do you have a vision for our family? What are you calling us to? So you begin to ask questions. What's important to your family and then your values? How has God wired your kids? And you're not asking, like, what's right for the kid or the family down the block? What are they doing? What are they doing? I mean, they seem like they're kind of cool. I like them. They've got it together. The mom only seems stressed out 2 out of 5 times that I see her instead of 5 out of 5. So they're obviously doing something, right? No, what is right for you? And it's not even what was right for us last season, because it may change. Your kid may change a little bit. The season that God has you in as a family might change a little bit, but what's right for today? So here's some things. What kind of family do we want to be, God? Do you want us to be? Are we a busy and active family? Are we kind of an on-the-go family where we like to be? My son is like this. My son, Jack, he asks me every single day, what are we doing tomorrow? So our bed, like I'm laying in bed, and then he comes and he stands right in front of me. And so I look over, and my eyes are right at his face, and he goes, what are we doing today? He's my kid who wants to be on the go, so he wants to know, what are we doing today? What are we doing tomorrow? What are we doing 3 days from now? I mean, he will, count it all out. So maybe you're that kind of family. You like to be on the go. Maybe you're a stay-at-home family. Are you a quiet or a loud family? Are you a sports family? A music family, dance, theater, what is it? Are you a family that's about community service and serving your neighborhood, serving your city, serving the world? Are you about church where that's the center of your life, and so you're going to figure out your schedule around that? Do you prefer to be together with other people, or do you want to just be together with your family? Do you like nature, or do you prefer to be at home reading or crafting? Do you like learning? Do you like building? Are you a family that's about food? You're like, we are a food family. No apologies, it's about food. Or maybe it's about movies or games. That you know what kind of family you are. So I'm going to have you talk with your group and answer this question. Describe your family, or maybe one of your family values. If you were asking the question, God, who are we as a family? Because he created you. He chose each of those kids in your life for you to be their mom for a reason. And so, God, who are we? What have you called us to? Who do you want us to be? What do we value? So, talk to your friends. What's your family? What's your values? Okay. So, this is a new way of thinking about things, right? And I'm hoping that it's helpful for you as you're thinking about decisions for your own life and that you're making for yourself. And what are you saying yes to? Because what you say yes to, you're saying no to. Something else, but also then for your kids. So our values, what's our value? That's going to drive our decisions. So if you value rest and downtime, then lots of activities is going to drive you crazy. I mean, if you enjoy downhill skiing, but you live in Iowa, well, then you're going to feel kind of frustrated, right? So I'm feeling frustrated right now because I have a value for our family that we would serve the community, that we would see the needs that exist in this place, and that we would move in and we would meet those needs, those who are less fortunate than us. I have a value for that, but it doesn't happen in our lives. And that frustrates me because I look at our calendar and I think, well, where are we going to figure that out? When I should have put it into the calendar and then you just work everything else around it, right? Okay, so I want to encourage you as you're thinking about this. Describe your family. What are your family values? To then also ask your kids, because so often we, as the parent, we think, as the mom, we're going to set the tone. We're going to set the tone for how this family's going to go, and you're going to just all line up, and you're going to follow the direction, right? But we need to ask our kids, like, what do you want our family to be like? Because they might surprise you. I mean, you may assume that, that your kids are like, well, I want us to be on the go all the time, preferably at my activities. We have a family in our town, and they have 3 kids, and they're involved in a lot, and so the family is on the go. But their daughter has expressed to me a number of different times, like, yeah, I kind of wish we didn't have so many activities and that we just had more time as a family. More time at home. And so I'm guessing if that mom knew it, she might be like, I'm sorry, what? I can make that happen, right? But I also want to encourage you because it actually might confirm for you that what you're doing is exactly who you are as a family. So we have friends who I would describe them as the epitome of like the sports family, right? The kids love playing sports. The parents like watching sports. If they have free time at home, they're watching sports on TV. They're talking about sports at the table. If they had like a moment where they're going to plan a family vacation, they're going to a ball game somewhere. That's what they would do, right? They're about sports. And so to be like, that's our family and that's our family values, then they can be like, embrace who God's made them to be and be like, yay, sports family. And not then feel guilty or apologetic about being involved with sports and having sports be a big part of your life because you enjoy it. It's something as a family you do together. So ask your kids, what are values to you? So when's a good time to do this, all right? So I think about summer's always a great time. Anytime you've got a new season, new calendar flipping, new schedules coming out, that sort of thing, it's a good time to do these things, to ask these questions. How are you being led? What kind of family do we want to be? How do we want to spend our time? What is important to us this year? What do we want to change from last year? Those kinds of questions. If we say yes to this activity, what are we going to say no to? And just asking the family. Because we're asking, we know that as adults, but it's modeling it for our kids, right? Because not only are we walking through, how do I be led in my life instead of driven? We're showing our kids, this is how you do it. This is how you be led. So it's family values. And then the second part is you begin to then look at each individual kid. Individual makeup. How has God made your kids? How has he wired them up? Like I talked about Tess before, with not really being into sports and basketball and that whole thing, but loving theater. That's her thing. And so that helps because as a mom, I've got this 15-page menu of options, right? Well, if I can figure out that my kid is an appetizer, well, I can just zoom right into the appetizer page. And then we've got a listing there that might fit her appetizer ways. And then I can focus in, and then I can just ignore and let go the rest of the 14 pages of the menu. And when moms are talking about their kid and they're doing something that's on page 9 of the menu, I can not get caught up in the swirl and the doubt and am I doing this right and second guessing, but I can be like, appetizer kid. We're going to stick with the appetizers, right? So we ask that about our kids. Okay. And it's not just like, what are they interested in? Also think about like, how are they wired, kind of their makeup, that sort of thing. So our youngest, Jack, he really has two speeds. It's 150% and then asleep. Those are the only two options for Jack. So last spring, he played baseball. And I thought, he's a great baseball player. We would play in the yard, and he could hit anything. If it's anywhere close to the plate, he would just knock it out of the park. And I'm thinking, baseball, this kid's going to be a great baseball player someday. But I'm not sure if you've been to a kindergarten t-ball game lately, but there is not a lot of action in kindergarten t-ball. And so at one point, he is playing first base. That would be an action position. You'd think he'd be like in the zone at that point, right? But he's playing first base, and the ball is hit out into the field, and his teammate actually fielded the ball, and then is going to throw it over to first base, except for he looks, and Jack is no longer on first base. He has walked himself over to the fence where his friend is standing, had popcorn. And so he's like doling out popcorn to Jack, and he's eating the popcorn there, and he's supposed to be playing first base, right? But it's because baseball, there wasn't enough action to keep him attention. So next spring came rolling around, and we're like, maybe we should try soccer. And so he tried soccer, and he's loved it because guess what? He just gets to run and run and run. And guess what? I love it because at the end of the day, he is just dog tired. And so it works out awesome. But that's what it's about. It's about thinking, okay, what's valuable to our family? How have you wired us as individuals, God? As what are my kids like? What do they love? What are they good at? Are they high energy? Are they low energy? Can they handle multiple activities at once? And then you want to use it just kind of as guidelines. Because here's what I think we do. We set up rules. When we first became parents, before we had a little baby and no other kids, we were like, okay, we're making a pact, you and me. We are not going to be that family that does a million activities at once. Our kids can do one activity and one activity only. Do we understand? We're in agreement. Okay, we made this pact. And that held for a long time. And we tell our kids, you got to pick. You do one activity. Until, again, Jack, third kid, he rolls around, and again, high capacity, the kid who wants to know constantly, what are we doing today? What are we doing tomorrow? What are we doing the day after that? What about 3 days from now? He wants to be on the go, and he likes a lot of activity in his life. So this fall, we broke our rule. And so this is where I've learned that it's all about being led. You can have all these guidelines that you think are going to work, but God's just going to be like, but he's a different kid. So for the first time this fall, he did both flag football and soccer. And we're just coming out of the seasons, and actually it was okay. It was good for him, and it worked for us. And so it was an experiment. We're going to try it. We'll see how it works. But use them as guidelines and maybe not necessarily rules. Okay, so we're changing the way we think. And then what? It says, then you will know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. Being led. What's our family? How are we like? What are we like? What's this kid like? And then we begin to walk it out. And God shows us, this is what you should do. This is my will. This is good. This is pleasing. Holy Spirit parenting. And I love it because then when the swirl comes around, you can just stand like a rock. Because you're like, man, we prayed about this, and I know God spoke to us, and for now, we were supposed to say no to this activity, and so we're free, and it's worked out great, or I know we were supposed to say yes to this, and then you can feel confident when you're having those moments when you're eating dinner at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, because it's the only time you can all eat dinner together, but you can be like, I know we were supposed to do this. I have confidence in that. Okay, so it's a process. But like I said before, you get to walk this out. You get to do it as a family, and you get to lead your kids in it. You get to model it for them. My friend Heather, she has a great term for it. She talks about raising transformers, not conformers. Isn't that what we want as moms? We don't want to raise conformers. We don't want to raise kids that just copy the behaviors and the patterns of this world, and they go out for chess club because their friend goes out for chess club, and then they decide to go out for the school play because their friend's in the school play. Not that that's not okay. Friends are great, but we want them to not just be conforming because the world's telling them, or sometimes we are telling them, you better do this activity. But we want to raise transformers, ones who are transformed, who are led, so that we know what is God's will, what is perfect and pleasing to God. So we're giving our kids that chance. So here's what I want to do tonight to finish our time. Because I know we're busy moms and there's a lot that we want to do that we don't always have time to do. I want to end our time by giving you a chance to do this exercise for your family. And they helped me create a little worksheet for you that you can use where you're going to have the chance. There's some questions and some things to think about where you're going to be able to say, who are we as a family? What are some values that we have? And write those down. Again, that you can take back and start the conversation with your kids. And then on the back, you're going to see there's a place where it might say kid number 1, kid number 2, kid number 3, kid number 4. I think if you have more than 4 kids, you'll have to get a second sheet. So just be like, I need to. Because we will get you all squared away for that. But begin thinking about your kids then. How have you wired them? Like this one's really, needs more downtime, or they're more quiet, or this one needs to be on the go. This one's high energy. This one's low energy. This one loves theater. This one loves sports. This one's great in math. And begin to think about your kids. Begin to think about your values. They have sheets. They have pencils. And I'm going to give you like 10 to 15 minutes to do this exercise. And so you as moms, here's my goal for you, is you as moms would then be able to look at your kids and then celebrate them for who they are, come alongside them in some of the choices they're making in their lives and that you're encouraging them to make, and be raising transformers, not conformers. Raising kids who are not going to be driven, but they're going to be led by the Holy Spirit, exactly who they're called to be and who your family's called to be. So you're going to have sheets, and you're going to have like 15 minutes to do this, and then here's how you're going to end. You can just go if you're ready to get out of here. If you got to get your kids out of the childcare, you can do that. You can just sit and chat with your neighbor for the rest of the evening if you want. If you want to turn to the group you've been talking to and be like, let me share with you something, an insight about my kid that I've been talking about here and writing down, and you want to share some of your sheet, that would be great. It's really kind of whatever you want it to be. So hold on 1 second. We're having sheets. Okay, so if you were here last month, you may have picked up one of these cards. This is something that we're doing at Momentum this year, is that we're going to end every night. So I'm going to do this now so that I don't have to try to bring you all back together after your sheet, because you're going to be thinking about your sheet, and it's going to be great. And so I'm just going to do this now. But this is an affirmation card. It has our verse for the year on it. And then on the back, each of us as speakers has written up an affirmation that we want to speak over you. And that you then get to take this card. They still have some cards left from September if you missed that one. You can grab the card now for October. And so this is something that you can put in your van, on your mirror, on your fridge, in your Bible, wherever you're going to see it on a regular basis. And it's something that you can speak over yourself when it comes to being led and not driven when it comes to your family and your kid activities. That's our theme for this month. So I'm going to give you 15 minutes to do this, but before that, I want to speak this affirmation over you. So if you would stand, and this is how we want to finish the night. You're going to stand and let me speak this. If you feel comfortable and you want to just receive it, this is just a position of receiving. Just like if someone wanted to hand something to you, you would just do this. So you can just put your hands out just to receive what it is that God wants to speak over you. And actually, I have this. I want you to even just put your hands out like this, and then I'm going to have you read this over yourselves as well, and I'm just going to read it with you, okay? This is the truth about who you are as moms, and we're going to just remind ourselves of this all month long, okay? I am not driven by the pressures or the messages of the world. Just because the world says it doesn't make it true. I am a mom who is led. I ask God and I listen. He shares his heart and transforms my thinking so I know his will, which is good and pleasing and perfect. So I will embrace my family's values. I will celebrate my kids' unique gifts. And by the power of the Holy Spirit, I will lead my family to become transformers, not conformers. Amen, right? Okay, enjoy your time, 15 minutes or so, and then talk or catch up and have a great night. One last thing, just a reminder, if you're interested in signing up to volunteer for the December outreach, the clipboard is lost among you somewhere. And so if we could keep that moving or put it in the back, that would be great. Thank you.